What's going on, everyone? So Rally to War is coming out in like a week and a half, and before that comes out, I wanted to discuss some of the best cards that are in that set. So what I've done is I've gone through and I have picked um, two from every color, which I think are going to be the best cards. Now these are only the rare cards, since most of the double rares are going to be sought after anyways. And I'm going to do a separate video talking about the best commons and uncommons. I limited this to just the rares, with the exception of one double rare. So, and again, I limited myself to 2 per color, just to try and make me think of which ones were actually going to be the best ones. And then, once I go through the 10 cards that I've picked out, I also picked out one honorable mention for each color. So to kick things off, as you can see on the screen, we have Teriel, High Priestess. So she is an amazing yellow card that prevents your fort from being destroyed if she's destroyed. So I feel like this would combo really well in a yellow-blue deck, using the card Hidden Heart's Reverse Thunderstrike, so that your opponent thinks that they're safe going to attack her, but then you flip that ambush and stand her and let her block. So then that protects your fort, and essentially extends the end game and could potentially put things in your favor, since your opponent can no longer attack that last fort that you have. And then her other ability is a Fort Burst, which is put this card into your discard pile, and opposing creatures cannot attack for this turn. So that is huge, especially if it's the first Fort Burst that they hit. However, with my luck, this is probably going to be the last card that gets attacked. But still a really powerful effect, especially mid-game. It can really easily turn the tides of the game. However, in a yellow mirror match, this is going to have a really tough time going against Logra Swiftblade, who cannot be blocked by creatures with one attack. So he's going to get to attack past this creature, and she's not going to be able to block and get herself killed to protect the fort. But either ways, this is going to be a really amazing card, and is possibly what's going to make yellow stand out as a deck. And then next up with the yellow, we have the card that I talked about on Saturday's Let's Talk video, and this was the official revealed card for Sunday night. And it's Replenish the Ranks, which is a 4-drop yellow card, which is essentially Pot of Greed from Yu-Gi-Oh!, letting you draw 2 cards. And then if you're playing at least 2 yellow banners, you could potentially get both of the extra effects off, which lets you draw 3 cards for free. So this lets you get a lot of advantage, mostly because it's just giving you more options. And if you've been watching my deck review videos, I talk about how drawing cards is important in this game, unlike what I initially thought, where it wasn't going to have that big of an effect. So I think this card is going to be extremely important. Maybe not a 4 of, just because of the really tight conditions that it has to meet in order to be played for free, but I think it is definitely worth playing at least 2 copies, just for the times when you do hit the yellow 6, or pair it with a card such as Tomar, or any of the other cards that let you change your dice values, just so that you can get this off, because again, it is going to give you a lot of advantage. So now moving on to the green cards, Eleanor is the one double rare card that I just could not exclude from this video. I feel like this card is going to be extremely amazing, really punishing control decks that rely on ambushes. We did get the official ruling that her auto ability does trigger before your opponent's auto ambushes, so she does destroy the card before it can trigger. So this is really going to put the game in your favor, because your opponent's probably going to be relying on that ambush. And then she also has the Green Dragocross ability. With that first ability, she does have to attack the fort that the ambush is at. So if they do roll like a 5 or a 6, you're going to have to spend her attack on that. So instead of that, you could Dragocross her green and attack another fort and then shut off all the ambushes for that turn. So this card really stops your opponent's defenses and lets you get the upper hand, and pairing this with the cards such as Leilania's Call lets you play it for 2. So this card is going to be extremely powerful, especially throughout the course of the Rally to War era, and probably through the next set or 2 as well. So this is one of the cards I would really recommend picking it up, and maybe even dropping $40 for a playset if you can find them for $10. And then the next green card is one that I feel like has been forgotten just because it was revealed so early, and we've had so many other powerful cards revealed since then, and that's Red Fang, Born Leader. So he's a 3-drop 4/2 creature, and when he destroys a Drago Shield, you get to get a resource from the top of your deck. So I have calculated it out, and in a game, the most amount you can use this effect is twice, unless you choose not to resource one of your turns, but I feel like that would just be kind of pointless. So even if you play 2 of him, or you have 1 of him and attack twice, because of the restriction where you have to have 6 or less resources, you're only going to be able to get that ability off twice. So he's a really great card to see early game, and then late game, he's still a 3-drop with 4 attack, so he's still extremely powerful, even though his time has kind of passed. So this is one of those cards that I would recommend picking up, and I can actually see this being viable over cards such as Growth or Fleetwing Sprite, because it does have potential in the late game. So now moving on to the blue cards, the first one that I had chosen was Variable Assault Unit Fuma. So it's a 4-drop blue card that returns an opponent's creature to their hand when it's summoned. So this is amazing because it sets them back a turn and there's no restriction on the cost of the card that you have to target. There are a few other cards where you have to target a cost X creature, but this one does not have that restriction. So late game, you could bounce back their boss monster, anything aside from Zarko, because that's just going to let them summon it again. And they're going to have to pay the resources to summon it again. And that's going to allow them to play less cards on their next turn. So with being a 2/3, those are alright stats for early game. You could potentially play this on your first turn just to set them back. If on their turn 1 they played a 3-cost creature, on your turn 1 you could play this, bounce back to their hand, and they've essentially lost a turn. So I think this card will see a lot of use. Not sure if it's worth running forward just because of the high cost, but if you play it in a ramp deck utilizing Red Fang or any of the Fleetwing Sprites, the Growths, I do think this card will be amazing. But next up, we have Plato Accomplished Scientist. So this is one of the cards that was more recently revealed, which lets you play an ambush from your hand when he's summoned. So, being a 3-cost creature, if you go first, you can play him and an ambush, essentially playing 2 cards for the cost of 1, and I think that's what makes him so amazing. Now the one downside to this card is that you do have to have this card and an ambush in your hand. So you do have to run quite a few ambushes in order to get his effect off. So I think this would be a great card that fits into the Mystical Hunters trial deck if you're looking to upgrade that, because I believe there's 10 or more ambushes. Yeah, I think there's 12 or 14 in that deck. Not 100% sure. But yeah, this card does fit really nicely in there because you're usually guaranteed an ambush in your opening hand. And having 4 endurance, early game it's not going to die so easily. So you could potentially use his effect to bounce one of your ambushes back to your hand. Which, if that 4 got destroyed before you can trigger the ambush, because your opponent was playing something like Eleanor, then you essentially get to reuse it, which is kind of nice. So definitely a card worth looking into, and if you're looking to play any blue deck or any ambush heavy deck, I would really recommend picking up this card. So now moving on to the red cards, I felt like there weren't a lot of good red rares. The double rares are amazing, and the exclusive cards in the Alpha Dominance Trial deck are really good, and even the uncommons and uncommons I felt were better than the rare cards we had for this, so this was one of the harder decisions for me, just because of the lackluster effects that they had. So the ones that I ended up choosing were Doomfire Avatar, which lets you siphon 3, and then either deal 3 damage to a creature, or do 4 damage to a Drago Shield. So, it does put pressure on your opponent, especially, this goes back to the Fuma discussion, where playing it turn 1 really sets your opponent back a turn, and they're essentially starting all over. I feel like this card just kind of does the same thing, but on a worse scale because you have to reduce your shield, or your dice roll. However, along with that, playing that on your first turn sets your opponent back if you're going second, and then they're going to have to pay the same amount of resources to play that card, and only having 1 or 2 creatures, your fort is probably going to be safe, the fort that you siphoned 3 off of. So I do see some potential. This would probably be one of the cards I would recommend running 4 of. I know I didn't really like this card when I did the Let's Talk video, but after playing around with the trial deck, I do see the potential in this card, and I feel like it's going to be a different game than what we've been playing with the demo deck. But anyways, the other red card that I chose was Gloss Will of Steel, and I feel like she shines the most in a Vylon deck. Cards that, or a deck that wants to push out Vylon and then abuse his ability. So it's when this creature is summoned, choose any number of opposing creatures and deal X damage divided, where X is the number of your red creatures. So, late in the game, if you have a Vylon on the field already, you could play 1 or 2 or 3 goblins if you have them in your hand, and then summon Gloss, and be able to do 4 damage to your opponent, and I feel like that just applies a lot of pressure to your opponent's field. And she is a 3-drop, so you could use this effect even earlier in the game if you wanted to. And yeah, I think this is just one of those cards to look out for. Like I said, there weren't really a lot of good red rare cards. So moving on to black now. First off, we have Gluttony of Albert, and this card is all guns blazing that destroys cards. So, I talked a lot about this in the Let's Talk video, so I'm not going to go as in-depth right now. But it essentially blows up one of your opponent's forts, giving you a clear attack in to finish off the game. And then, even being a fort burst, you can choose a creature and destroy it. And that is huge because it stops your opponent from attacking. So, I think black is really going to thrive from all of these destruction effects. And in a blue-green mix, you have blue that can control green to ramp up your stuff so you can play this card faster, and then you've got the black stuff to destroy, and I feel like that's just going to be a really powerful combination early on in the game. Or early on in the game, as in before we get a few more sets. And then the other black card that I chose was Midnight Visitor, which lets you destroy a cost X creature and destroy it where X is the number of your black creatures. So it's kind of like Gloss, except for you can't split the damage. But being a 3-drop, a 3/3 creature, I still feel like this is one of those really good mid-game creatures, where it really lets you put the game in your favor, and essentially steal the game back from your opponent. So black was one of those decks that I feel is going to be splashed into stuff. I don't think it's going to be able to survive as its own deck quite yet until we see more of the cards. But then, moving on to the honorable mentions, These are other cards that I thought were worth looking into and worth investing in, but I didn't think they shined as bright as the cards that we just discussed. So for yellow, I chose Darion, Brutal Enforcer, and the reason that I chose him is because he's a 2-drop, and his ability is when this force is attacked, you can destroy this creature and block an attack. So, another way of thinking about this is he can block an attack even if he is rested, because of his ability that lets you destroy himself. So, even if your opponent plays Dismantle to rest him, or an All Guns Blazing, you still get to protect that fort, which I think is awesome. And then his Fort Burst is to replace himself as a barrier. You get to play the top card of your deck as a barrier at the fort he was at. So your opponent has to get another attack in order to destroy the fort. So this is one of those really cool effects, and this is one of those cards that also abuses the rule that you cannot lose the game until the end of your turn, because if he is your last Fort Burst, then you're putting that shield down, and if your opponent used all of their attackers, then you have one fort left, and you get to, or one barrier left, and you get to take another turn. So I think this card is going to have a huge impact, especially in the late game, if it gets used as a Fort Burst. Then we've got Falthlast Lost Wind as a green 1-drop. It has Invade Red, which, seeing the potential in red with the trial decks and how good that deck just kind of worked together, I think this card is going to be important. It's a 1-drop that you can play late in the game that just lets you not be blocked by creatures. So I believe this is the only card we've seen with Invade. I may be wrong, but that definitely makes this card worth picking up. And this is one of those ones that I would probably run 2 in the main deck, 2 in the side deck. But as the meta is more defined, that'll be what determines if this card is worth it or not. So the blue card that I chose as the honorable mention is Telios Erstwhile Guardian. This card is really good because you can rest another creature when it does damage, and then if it's Drago Crossed blue, you can stand this creature. So I have heard a lot of discussion about a mono blue deck, and in that kind of scenario, I feel like this card is going to be really amazing, because as soon as you lose a blue fort, or any of your forts since they're all blue, you're going to be able to start using her Drago Cross ability. So yeah, this is a really amazing card, and the artwork also looks beautiful in this. So then the red card that I chose as the honorable mention is Goblin Maid Avalanche, which lets you destroy all creatures at a fort, or deal 3 damage to all creatures at a fort. And playing this mid-game or early game, you're probably going to be able to destroy 2 creatures with it. And if you mix this with yellow, you get to draw a card after that. So this would fit in nicely in the Shadow Legion trial deck, since you already have the red and the yellow. And I do think this is going to be a good card. Maybe not worth running 4 of just because of the amount of damage that's dealt, but definitely worth running 2 if you're playing a red-yellow variant. And then the final card I wanted to talk about was Offering of Souls. Looking at all the black cards, there weren't really too many that stood out to me as for the rares, but I felt like this card was worth mentioning because once someone breaks this card, it will probably go up in price. So I would pick up a copy or 2 just to hold on to it, if you can find them for like $1. And then once someone breaks the card and it jumps up to $10, that's when you should get rid of them. So this is just an investment-worthy card, and it could just be a potentially fun deck to use. So anyways, let me know what cards you thought that I missed or what cards you agreed with down below. And then be sure to check out Dragorical. That's where some of these images came from. They have all the cards that have been revealed. And be sure to check out the Facebook page as well. I think we passed 1,000 1,000 page likes. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, be sure to go and check out that. We've been having a lot of great discussions since the trial deck has come out. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter, where hopefully as this game grows, I'll start being more active on there. I know I've been kind of bad about that right now. But yeah, be sure to check that out. And feel free to tweet at me. I mean, that might get me more active. But as always, thanks for watching.